Okay, so thanks again for being here this afternoon for the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program Building Successful Collaborations webinar. The presentation will be delivered by Allison Goin, Strategic Development and Program Design Consultant, and I'll be helping as facilitator and host. My name is Kristen Aldrich, the National Technical Assistance Coordinator at New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. So first, I just want to give a quick orientation to the technical aspects of WebEx for folks who may not be familiar. You can adjust your audio connection if needed using the toolbar in the top of your screen on the left-hand side. And then in terms of asking any questions throughout the webinar, we'll be saving time at the end to address any questions that you may have, but feel free to send any questions through the chat box. There is also a raise your hand feature if you are having any trouble with entering questions into the chat box. You can use that as well. But we'll be collecting any questions and again addressing them at the end of the presentation. So just to quickly introduce who will be speaking with you today, again, it will be Allison Goin, who does program design for social impact, and myself, Kristen Aldrich, the National Technical Assistance Manager at New Entry. So to briefly look at the agenda for today, I'll be giving a quick overview of New Entry and the BFRDP program. We'll be jumping into the collaboration requirement that BFRDP does require for their grant program. We'll be delivering the top 10 tips for successful partnerships, and again, time at the end for question and answer. Following the webinar, you'll receive an email, which also will go to anyone who had registered for the webinar, which will contain a link to a follow-up evaluation so that we can collect your feedback to improve our webinars moving forward. There will be a link to the recorded webinar, and the presentation slides will include a PDF of the top 10 tips for collaborations and a link to other resources. And to quickly give an overview of New Entry, we are a project of Tufts University and do on-the-ground work in Massachusetts with farmer training and food access programs. We have an incubator farm and a farm business planning course, so we're working with new and beginning farmers in the generally in the eastern Massachusetts and kind of neighboring areas. We also have a national team on which I serve, which provides support to food systems organizations across the country. And for this project in particular, we are part of the Education Enhancement Team Grant from the USDA in order to support applicants of BFRDP. So to give a little more background on our presenter today, Allison Goin is an independent consultant based in Minnesota, but working nationally. She's developed 28 proposals to different USDA programs, resulting in $1.5 million to date. She's facilitated numerous partnerships for multi-year USDA grants and has matched organizations with new strategic partnerships, including mergers. She is available privately for consultation and proposal development in case folks are interested in working with her further. So to ground a little bit more in the BFRDP Technical Assistance, as I mentioned, New Entry and our partners have been awarded a BFRDP Education Enhancement Team Grant in order to provide technical assistance to applicants for that program or people interested in learning more about the BFRDP program and if it's a good fit. The technical assistance that we are able to provide includes developing and sharing resources, creating an online self-assessment tool, which is currently available on New Entry's website, which we can link to in the follow-up email. We have done some other webinars, and we'll have additional webinars in this series providing some training and information on the application process. There's also a number of other areas to go to for additional resources and support. The BFRDP website and prior RFAs will have a lot of information, of course, about the program, which is a great place to go and get a good sense of your fit for this grant program. And farmanswers.org also has a wealth of information and resources that could be helpful for folks as they embark on the BFRDP program to see if it's going to be a good fit. So within the RFA, and we pulled some information directly from last year's RFA here, there is a requirement that any proposals include a partnership element. So direct quote from the RFA as posted here is that applications may only be submitted by a collaborative, state, tribal, local, or regionally based network or partnership of qualified entities, and applications submitted by organizations that do not involve other entities in a network or partnership are not eligible. So it's pretty clearly stated that partnerships must be a factor and involved in your proposal. And in regards to the evaluation criteria for what they're looking for in terms of these partnerships and collaborations, they want to see a substantial and effective collaborative network. They want to see that it will meet the needs of your audience. They want to see that it will make use of the expertise and strengths of those that are partners working on the project. The partners should play a role in the project design. There should be equitable and appropriate decision-making and oversight, and tracking records of success will also be an important factor. And with that, I'll hand it over to Allison to talk about the top 10 tips for successful BFRDP partnerships.
All right. Thanks so much, Kristen. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I think the first thing I wanted to say is congratulations to everybody on the call for thinking in advance. I know it's hard to get motivated in the middle of the summer to start thinking about applying for a grant that has not been announced yet. And, you know, I've been working with organizations for the past 5 years on federal grant proposals, and I'm always trying to get people to start early, and it's hard to do because we get motivated by that deadline, and without that deadline, there's so many other things that you could be doing. So I just wanted to say that, you know, you're already on track to putting in a successful proposal by starting to think about it now. And in addition, we really try to make sure that the tips and the ideas that we're putting into these webinars, they're tailored to the BFRDP program, but they really are things that are going to help your organization in all of your work, maybe aside from any obvious instructions on how to fill out an application. You know, partnerships is something that's an integral part of everybody's work, and I think that these tips that I've come up with really can be applied to any of those partnerships. So I'm hoping that they'll be useful for you now, and then also useful for you with your BFRDP proposals. The other thing is that these topics, the 10 tips, each one really applies both to the proposal development process in terms of writing your proposal, bringing your partners together, and thinking that through, as well as to how you're going to implement your project if you do get the grant. So as I've worked as a consultant, I have done both things quite a bit. So I've brought new organizations together for collaborative proposals. I've matched organizations with different partners. I've helped partners who've been working together a long time put together proposals. And then, like Kristen said, I'm also managing a number of multi-year USDA grants right now that I designed the program for, wrote the proposal for, and then when it was funded, I'm involved in the project management and helping to facilitate those collaborations. So I've seen it from all sides, and I'm hoping that I can get some insights from that experience. So with that said, we'll move on to, I did these in a countdown format just to build up some excitement. So number 10, start with what is already working. this is probably a no-brainer for a lot of people, but as you're thinking about putting together a proposal for the BFRDP program, you're going to want to look at the partners you already have in place that are just your go-to people. You know that that organization will respond to your emails. They will, be there when you need them. They don't drop the ball when you plan to do something together, like a field day, or you need a letter of support or something like that, or other places that you know that already support your work and want to see you succeed. The main thing to think about when you're really starting to look at partners is that you've got to have partners that you can work with both programmatically and administratively. So for those of you who have had a USDA grant, this is not going to be news to you. Those of you who are doing this for the first time, federal grants have a lot of administrative requirements. And if you get the grant, it's great that you got the grant, you'll be so excited and thrilled, and then you'll find out that there is a lot of work involved in administering that grant. I know Kristen has experience with that as well and could probably speak to that too. But when it comes time to do your reporting and your invoicing and all the documentation that you need, you have got to have partners on board that are going to take your call and respond to your email and get you that documentation. Otherwise, it just becomes unwieldy. So that's 10. 9, think strategically. So, you start with the partners that are good partners, and then you want to think a little bit further about, first of all, your proposal. If you want to put in a successful proposal, what's the best strategy to do that? One thing I always say first is that you've got to start early, like I said before. In my experience with over 24 USDA proposals, the partnership part is one of the most time-consuming parts of the proposal because you are working with a whole other organization's structure, politics. If you're working with a university or government, you've got bureaucracy involved, and it takes time. You've got to get approval from the right people, and you've got to get clarification on what everyone's doing. So starting it now is great. Other strategic considerations are things like, what are your weaknesses as a program? Where do you think you've got some gaps that might just bring your proposal down a little bit? How could you fill those in with partners? So maybe there's a need that your farmers have that you just don't have the capacity to meet. Is there someone else in the community that could meet that for you? Also, in terms of what populations of farmers you're reaching, can you reach out to new populations? Can you, expand your services, those kinds of things. And then finally, in terms of thinking strategically, you want to keep a cap on how much new work you're going to create for yourself with partners. So while, USDA proposals are a great opportunity to develop new program components, you don't want to have your whole project be new work because it'll be too much to take on. 8, expand the frame. So along those lines of thinking strategically, the BFRDP program allows you to work with a whole range of different type of entities. They call entity types. So that's kind of your legal entity. So if you're a nonprofit, you can work with government agencies, you can work with colleges and universities, tribal governments, private for-profit businesses, all are allowed as partner entity types. So it's really a broad range, and you don't need to get stuck in only considering other organizations just like yours that are small, say you're a small nonprofit, you only work with other small nonprofits that are serving farmers. You might find that if you bring in a partner that's a totally different type of entity, they might have resources and skills that you don't have. So again, small nonprofits don't have a lot of administrative capacity, for instance. Universities do usually. Or if you are an incubator farm and you need access to more markets for your farmers, maybe you can find a good partnership in a market. So even a farmer's market or another kind of a grocery store that wants to buy from your farmers, or something like that is, you know, they'll have a vested interest in wanting to see your farmers succeed, but they're not exactly doing the work from your particular approach, and you can find ways to complement each other in that work. Oh, back on expand the frame. So break the competition barriers. This relates to that expanding the frame, and I was going to give an example actually locally. So I have worked for many years with an organization here in Minnesota called Minnesota Food Association, and they have an incubator farm program called Big River Farms. They are a current successful BFRDP grant recipient and a past BFRDP grant recipient. They also work a lot with new entry. And over the years working with them, I've seen that, you know, they could benefit from additional administrative support. So last year, I introduced them to another client of mine that is a successful CFP grant recipient of the Community Food Projects grant, the food group, which is actually a food bank here in Minnesota. And over the course of the last year, ended up actually facilitating a merger between these two organizations, where now Big River Farms is a program of this bigger organization, the food group. But the point here is that a lot of people had not thought about putting together a food bank and a farmer training program. But what we found is that there were so many areas of overlapping values and wanting to make sure there's broad food access in the community, and seeing how the food system is all connected, and that supporting farmers is very much linked to making sure that people have food on their tables. And this point, breaking the competition barrier, is related to that as well, in that, you know, there's often a kind of unspoken barrier between organizations partnering, in that you're competing for the same funding, or you're competing, especially locally, or you're competing even for sometimes the same federal grant. So I really encourage people to try to work with this issue of competition. You know, one thing I would say from my experience is that anytime I have brought together more than one organization, especially organizations in the same geographic area, but not always, those collaborative projects have a much higher likelihood of getting funded. So the more you can work with other people, and maybe, you know, it means that you get a smaller amount of the final grant dollars if you share your grant dollars with other organizations, but it can increase your chances to get the grant to begin with. So would you rather get the grant and then share it, or not get the grant at all? I'm not saying those are black and white, always true. But like Kristen said, this program particularly requires collaboration. They want to see real collaborations, not just, you know, we got letters of support from 10 different people, but they're not really going to be that involved in the project. They want to see real partnership. And I think my guess is that some of the motivation for them doing that is to address this competition issue. Each year that goes by, there's more applicants to this program, and they can only fund so many. So I think they are trying to encourage people working on the same things or are doing complementary things to work together. So expectations are key. We're going to move now a little bit more into how you start working with your partners once you've identified partners. So the first couple of points were about thinking of which partners you want to use, and now we'll talk about how to make those partnerships work. So of course, expectations are the top thing. That everybody has to have the right expectation for what is going to be involved in this project, and should start from the very beginning of your conversations. So for instance, if you're starting now to talk about, hey, why don't we work on a BFRDP proposal together, you want to start right away by saying, you know, if you're interested in doing this with us, we're going to need regular meetings or regular phone calls or communication or, you know, et cetera, to have input into the proposal development. You also need to make sure that you're getting buy-in and support from the right leaders at your partner organization. So you might have a contact who works in the program part, and they're really gung-ho and they want to do the project, but they might need the director of that program to support it before you can really move forward. I've seen, potential partnerships fall apart for that reason. If there's not sufficient communication within the partner organization, that it gets to, someone on the leadership team and they say, oh no, we don't want to do that, or we can't take that on, or whatever it is. So that's very important. This point actually could go much deeper, and like Kristen said, I'm available individually to consult with people about it, but there's so many considerations that you have to discuss with your partners. For instance, the BFRDP program requires a match, and our next webinar is on matching funds and budgets, so we'll go into that in more detail then. But one thing I've seen is that if you ask your partners to contribute to the match, that helps to develop buy-in and make it a more collaborative relationship, but the partners have to know that up front, and they have to understand what that means. They also have to understand their reporting responsibilities and what it means if one organization is the lead applicant and another is a sub-award or a subcontract of that project. So we'll go into more details on those various things, but just know that if you start out with clear communication and you're constantly keeping in mind that you want everyone to have the right expectations for this project, that will help both the proposal and the project. Give partnerships what they need to thrive. So this is kind of a preemptive, preventative tip, again, from my experience in seeing what happens when partnerships don't work. I think the first thing is to really think about the time it takes to administer a partnership. So if you go through the proposal process and you see how long it takes you to go back and forth with your partners, talk about the roles they're going to play, talk about their budgets, et cetera, that amount of time is going to be very similar if you get the award and then you're working together to administer the project. So I always encourage people, make sure that you have dedicated staff time. It doesn't have to be just one person, but that when you put together your proposal, you're very clear that you have to have staff time allocated to managing your partnerships. And in the BFRDP proposal, they'll ask you, what is your management plan? And it's really easy to kind of just gloss over it and say general things like, we will be in regular communication with our partners, and our partners will contribute to providing referrals for the program, right? And then when you actually go to implement that project, you find out that while everybody agreed that they would help with outreach and referrals, you don't have enough nuts and bolts, and nobody really knows what that means, how they're going to contribute to that, and then you have to kind of scramble to get your meet your quotas for how many farmers you want involved. So you've got to have staff time dedicated. If you don't have enough staff on your current team, then you need to add capacity in your proposal, or look at hiring an outside consultant or contractor. This is part of what I do in terms of project management and collaboration, looking at a smaller role where you're not taking on a full staff role, but you are building in additional capacity to make sure that you have someone to help you with that communication. And sometimes having an outside person can be helpful too with facilitation and any potential conflicts that can come up, especially if there's money involved where you're sharing your grant funds. That can get touchy for some people. So that's something to think about. Let's see. You also want to make sure that then if your partners are going to have part of the budget allocated to them as a sub-award or a subcontract, that their budget is adequate to what they need too, so that they have enough staff time to do what they say they're going to do. Otherwise, it'll be frustrating for them and frustrating for you. Number 4 is use the structure of the grant to help you. So, federal grants are very lengthy and complicated in some ways, and I think, this whole project that New Entry is doing, which is funded by the BFRDP program itself is intended to help all of you with getting successful applications together, because they recognize that it is complex, it is lengthy, it does require some specific expertise, and it can be a frustrating process for that reason. However, there are a lot of components of the proposal that can be very helpful to your partnership if you make use of them. You know, they have tried to build into the proposal process a lot of detail and, thinking things through, precisely because they want the partnerships that are part of the proposal to be realistic and to be successful. It can be, sometimes just a little bit of a pain when you're doing the proposal thinking, oh my God, now I have this other piece I have to fill out, and then I have this budget narrative, and then but I've found, again, when the grants are awarded, that you're going to be glad you have those things, because you can constantly look back to see, oh, what did we put in that partner letter? And you should have a breakdown in that letter of exactly what that partner is supposed to be doing and how much money was allocated to those activities. The same thing goes for when you get the grant and you have reporting requirements and you have financial documentation requirements. Those can provide the structure to help you push your partners if you're having trouble, getting what you need. You can say, hey, I've got to have this documentation about what you've done because it's required for the reporting. And that way it's a little less personal, and you can put it on the grant, and it's not just you trying to make someone's life more difficult. It actually has a reason behind it. And it's a balance. I've talked to many clients about this, because the proposals also do have page limitations, and they tell you, you have all this detail you have to pack in to a limited number of pages. And when you start your proposal, you'll think, oh, 20 pages, I have so much space, I'm never going to take that up. But then when you start going through each part of the proposal and realizing the level of detail they want, it actually can become challenging to fit. So, those things have to be balanced. 3 is have a backup plan. So again, now these last few points are a little bit about what to do if things go wrong. Again, from my experience with actually putting together collaborations and administering those, sometimes the partnership you set up is not going to work. And there can be many reasons for that. Some cases there's major staff turnover and a new leader comes into the organization and they're taking a new direction in their work and it no longer fits. Or maybe that partner just overcommitted themselves and they don't actually have the capacity to do what they said they were going to do. Or they're just bad at communicating and they don't ever respond to your emails. You don't have to have a full backup plan thought out at the beginning, but you do need to be aware that you might need one and what to do if things aren't working. A big lesson learned that I can share is that you have to be on the lookout for red flags from the very beginning. And I think that will help you prevent problems later on or address them if they come up quickly. So if you're starting the proposal process, you're talking to your partners, and just in putting together the proposal, something's not working right, you're not hearing back from people, or you're disagreeing a lot about the kind of the basic goals of your project, or there's something off, it's better to take that cue and find a different partner than to try to force, a square peg in a round hole, because it'll backfire on you later on. And that can be applied to any point along the process. So say you get the proposal together, okay, and you start the project, but then as you start the project, you're starting to see these red flags. Make a plan right away to address these, because what can happen, so your BFRDP grant, they're 2 or 3 years, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen. Some of the projects are 2, some are 3. I think you can even apply for 1. But that time goes quickly. And if you wait, almost a year before you start addressing a partner that's not filling their role, you're going to have a big problem on the report for that year, and you're going to be significantly behind on meeting your deliverables for the grant the longer you wait. So again, you can go back to the previous point about using the structure of the grant. Make sure that you rely on what you put together for the proposal to have accountability for your partners. I've found too that in some cases you need to add some additional requirements for your partners that aren't in the grant. So for instance, BFRDP asks for annual reports, but in some cases I've helped collaborations set up a system for quarterly reporting internally and more informally, but in writing, so that we're hearing from all the partners on a regular basis about what they're doing. Otherwise, if we wait until the annual report is due and then we find out that the numbers are way off or something's not working, it's too late to address it then. So those are ideas. And again, sometimes having somebody on the team or a consultant or a contractor or somebody outside the organization can help you with this as well. Number 2, don't take anything personally. So this has a few meanings to me. The first is actually to say literally about one person. You can't have a partnership hinge on one person because, as we all know, most of you are probably from nonprofits. Nonprofits have very, very high staff turnover rates. And the one person that might have been your contact when you developed your project may not be at the organization anymore by the time you get the grant. And what will you do then? And this can really be what causes a downfall in a lot of partnerships. Staff turnover is a major challenge. So, you submit your proposal. It's likely going to be, fall, this coming fall where the RFA is released, and then the proposal will be due like early winter, probably maybe December, January. We don't have exact dates yet. You're going to start that project next August or September. So there's almost a year waiting time between when you developed your project and when you get the funding and you start the project. If it's, in that amount of time, anything can happen. So I always encourage people, have more than one person at the organization. This goes back to, again, getting leadership on board, making sure that people on the team at that organization are understanding the project so that if your one person is not there, you still have somebody you can work with. The second meaning, of course, of not taking things personally is about personal politics and personality conflicts. Partnerships are made up of people, and as people, we all have, our opinions and our styles of communication, and conflicts can develop. People get offended or something happens, and it can really distract from the point of your project, which is to help beginning farmers. So, you want to make sure that if things start getting tense or whatever, that you can do as much as you can to direct the team back to the goals of the project and try to, address any problems that you're having in communication directly and up front so that you can move on. And then if the partnership isn't working, go back to number 3, have a backup plan, move on to a different partner. You really don't want your project to get bogged down in a partnership that's not a good fit. And then, what I've said is if your partnership is not going along well, it goes to number 1, which is we're all in this together. And this really relates to bringing people back to the point of the partnership, which is to help farmers. There's so many ways that partnerships can go off the rails. Competition is a big piece, like I said, personality things, money things. There's all kinds of different ways that we can screw this up. But really, the thing to remember is that if we're working on a BFRDP proposal, we have similar goals and values. We might have different ways of trying to achieve those goals. We might have different language that we use to talk about the farmers we serve. We might focus on a different part of the food system or a different type of agriculture or whatever it is, but ultimately we definitely have something in common. And I think it's just so important that this doesn't get lost in all of the nitty-gritty and stress and everything else that goes along with trying to do this work, you know, that we actually are all trying to change our food system for the better, and we're trying to support beginning farmers and being successful in this case, and remembering that that's the primary reason we're doing this. I think that it's important because you are working hard, everyone is busy, most people have more on their plates than they can handle, that we also remember to share positive things that are happening. So if you get the grant and you're working on your project and you have one good day or even one good interaction with a farmer or one small thing that goes well, that you just take a minute and send an email out to your partners with a picture or a farmer's story or just something to try to encourage each other and remind each other why we're doing this work and why we've put ourselves through the paces and trying to develop these projects and manage them and all of these things, is so that we can actually achieve the end goals that we have in mind. So those are my top 10. Let's see here. We have 2 webinars coming up, so those are there. You know, one other thing that we wanted to do with this webinar was to give people the opportunity to participate in a little bit of discussion or Q&A. It's hard, I know, on the phone and doing a webinar to really engage interpersonally, but as we were developing this agenda and thinking through these topics, we really thought it would be interesting to hear from people what's gone well for partnerships that you've been involved in and what have been your major challenges. You know, are the points that I've listed here, you know, have you experienced these things and do they seem to apply in your work? Or maybe if you've had a really successful partnership and you want to share something about that with the group, we can take a few minutes to do that now. So is that right, Kristen? Are we ready for that?
Yeah, no, that sounds great. And I think, again, if folks want to either type something in the chat box, I'm happy to kind of announce it for the group and share in that way. Or you're also welcome to go ahead and unmute yourself to share with the group if you like. Given the size and the number of participants, I think that will be manageable. So to unmute yourself, you can find your name in the participants area of the WebEx sort of toolbar here and click on the red microphone icon in order to unmute yourself that way. But in the meantime, I did want to just quickly mention, Allison, you were right. According to last year's RFA for BFRDP, the maximum amount of years for a project is 3 years. So just to clarify that piece. And we did get a question just now. Is there some sort of guide that lists the most successful projects and what made them successful? That's a great question, and while there might not be a guide that I'm aware of that gets into that kind of analysis about what made the project successful, they do include a list of all the abstracts of awarded BFRDP projects, which is a resource you can find. We have a link on the new entry website to the BFRDP website through NIFA. And so that's something we can make sure to include in the follow-up email as a link to all of those abstracts. So it will have information about the project and what it is and more, basically what the project is doing. But again, it might not get into that analysis piece. But great question. Another question came through regarding the amount of time it takes on the front end for paperwork for the proposal. So the comment is, my first go around, we put this on the back burner and wanted to work out details in the proposal, but when it came time to put contracts together, we were on a very tight deadline. I think that is another excellent point that Allison also talked about, just in terms of how much how much work it really takes to put together a BFRDP proposal, and considering all of the additional pieces when you have contracts and subcontracts, and if anyone's a, who is a subaward and all of those pieces, I think that's really important to note. And again, to echo Allison's previous comment, the fact that you all are here on this webinar and participating and thinking about this now at this point in the year when the RFA is likely to come out, later on in the fall, I think, speaks volumes and will only help to kind of get your ducks in a row, and the sooner the better.
So can we get anyone to participate, join us in a conversation, or share any snippets of your experience of good, bad, or partnerships that, or even if there's an issue that you had with partners that we didn't address? We'd love to just hear some people's experience. No brave souls, huh? No one wants to talk. It's a little hard talking to, this unknown, invisible group of people that you can't see. I know that that's a little intimidating for some people, but all right. Well, I think that if people don't want to ask questions to the group, here's our contact information. You're certainly welcome to send follow-up questions to Kristen and I, or either one of us. I'm happy to talk to people too as a consultant independent of this project if people want help with their proposals or even just planning for their proposal. Feel free to get in touch with me. And I would say too that, it'd be great if you would join us again for these 2 upcoming webinars. And we will be having additional educational resources and webinars next year as well. This is a 2-year project. And we'll be sending out the top 10 tips as a PDF too, so you can take a look at those.
Great. And just one other question came through. Is the funding secure for the next round? So as far as we know from what's been communicated to us from BFRDP and from the staff at NIFA, we are anticipating that an RFA will indeed come out this fall. So unfortunately, I don't have further information or guarantees, but from everything we've heard and what's been communicated thus far, we are anticipating that, yes, there will be funding for the BFRDP program for an RFA to come out this fall.
Yeah, and I would just add to that that's accurate to my knowledge too. And so the current situation is that the farm bill that we have right now is good for through fiscal year 18, which is the one that starts this coming fall. So the federal year, most of these programs start October 1st and run through September 30th. So our fiscal 18 is going to be starting this fall, and the RFA that's coming out this fall will be for fiscal 18. So there is funding in the farm bill, and so far it hasn't been threatened by any of the budget proposals. Next year, however, is much more of an unknown. So if you're on the fence about applying, you might want to do it this year because once the farm bill is complete, then the negotiation for a new farm bill is going to be happening over the course of this next year, and then we don't know what will happen with these programs. Okay, any other questions? No?
Yeah, I don't see any further questions coming through. So yeah, again, as Allison mentioned, feel free to reach out to either of us with any follow-up questions. We will be following up with the recording of the webinar and resources that have been mentioned, as well as an evaluation survey, which we would love to hear any feedback that you might have from our presentation today. So thank you again for joining us this afternoon. As Allison mentioned, we'll have a couple more webinars coming up in this current series, and additional trainings to take place next year. So thanks again. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you next time.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.